It's ghost story time. Tell us about Jeb Tucker.
Just an urban legend.
He's going to kill you.
Fine.
No, no!
We are talking about the Backwoods slasher movie 100 Acres of Hell, also known as Manhunt. This actually has 3 credited directors here, primarily Hank Leigh Hump, but you've also got Lisa Lakeman and Ernest O'Donnell as second unit directors. Now, the movie's star is actually a former WWE wrestler by the name of Gene Snisky, and he actually plays a wrestler within the movie called Buck Severs. Other notable kind of like named actor here, you've got Eileen Diaz, who has been appearing lots in horror movies these days, and of course she is somewhat of a kind of a scream queen in her own right. You've also got obviously a fairly big cast here of secondary characters whose names I'm not going to pronounce. I'll just butcher them and it'll just be embarrassing. Hashtag first world problems. Anyway, so let's discuss this movie. So what can I say is the log line for this one? Easy. This is WWE meets Wrong Turn. So the story focuses on 4 middle-aged friends. Buck is our main character, and like I've said, he's actually an ex-wrestler within this movie, played by a wrestler. And, you know, he has had some personal tragedy in his life. He's suffering from injuries through what he does for a career. So he goes out with his 3 friends, all of whom are not wrestlers, but they're kind of like various kind of like different kind of businesses and have their own distinct kind of personalities. And they want to go out for kind of like a bros weekend, out in the woods, doing what you do in the woods, drinking beer, shooting animals, all that kind of stuff, camping, going on hikes, all that good stuff. So these guys decide to go off to this legendary part of the woods called Foggy Creek, which is renowned to have all these kind of like urban legends about, you know, madmen running around in the woods, and the locals, as they're kind of doing all these films, so they don't go into the woods, and of course our protagonists ignore those warnings and go in anyway. And then along the way they kind of meet a couple of other kind of groups of people. There's a group of teenagers, there's a group of bikers, all of whom will come into the story a little bit later on. And once they get into the woods, they are of course hunted by this inbred backwoods slasher type who dresses up in animal bones and uses various kind of weapons to take out his victims and do, quite frankly, nasty things. So, what do we think of this movie? So let's discuss. Okay, so let's talk about the characters first of all, because I feel, you know, good characters in the movie kind of really gives it some plus points for me. And there are a few things to enjoy here. So obviously we have a wrestler playing a wrestler within the movie, and one of the elements that I enjoyed with this film is the fact that within the film itself, this guy is recognised as a celebrity. So we see various kind of characters throughout the movie go, oh, aren't you kind of like, you know, Buck Sevo, this famous wrestler? And he kind of has to react to that, and also how his friends actually kind of use that to their own kind of personal advantage, you know, picking up women and things like that. Oh, I know this famous guy, do you want to come and meet him, or etc, etc. So it's very much art imitating life, which I found very interesting. It's a kind of maybe a story element that we haven't seen loads in horror films, so I thought it was quite a nice inclusion here. And it also, I feel, makes it easier to accept this guy, the fact that he is a wrestler in real life and he's playing a wrestler, so it's not a huge stretch for him acting wise, but I thought it was probably a smart move, and it also explains why it's so bloody massive, of course. So that was good. Another kind of character element that I enjoyed this movie, and this might sound like a very small thing, and it may gross some people out, but the guys here act like real guys. I mean, when I'm out with my male friends and we're out kind of drinking and doing kind of like guy stuff, we are a little bit mean to each other in a kind of a friendly way. We prank each other. For example, in this film, you know, after the kind of a night out of drinking, one of them gets up and farts, and the other one's tense and then kind of holds it shut to give him like a Dutch oven. It seems just like a gross thing, but But that's what guys do. That is what men do when they are out drinking together. That's kind of like, that's the people I hang out with anyway. But it just seemed like a fun thing that these guys were a little bit kind of mean to each other in a kind of a playful way. I do have a problem with the characters, however, we'll come on to that. But I did like the attempt here to have like some kind of like realistic way that guys kind of banter. There's also some quite fun dialogue here in regards to some nice little elements that for throwaway kind of pop culture lines that I thought was quite fun. Because it doesn't kind of like Hank doesn't kind of like make a big deal about it. They'll just say kind of a quick line that is a reference to some type of kind of like you know, something in pop culture, and it's just they just move on. So although it was quite subtle, and that's actually quite rare, especially for kind of low budget films. So there are some elements that I liked about the characters. If you're a slasher fan, this movie is here to serve you. It's here to serve your needs in regards to a slasher film, because it's very much a by-the-numbers slasher film, and ticks those boxes that you're going to want from a slasher film. Introduces the characters, you know, teenagers having sex in the woods, a slasher taking them out one by one in kind of various kind of gruesome ways, lots of different kills, things like that. Fairly high body count. So if you're a slasher fan, then this will tick those boxes for you. There are some kind of like fairly good practical effects. A low budget film, admittedly, and this movie does kind of toggle between practical and CGI effects. The CGI is very noticeable. When it does do the kind of the practical effects, I've got to say it looks pretty good. And I think our slasher himself, when we kind of have the reveal about what he looks like, is pretty impressive. And I've got to say, I was kind of reminded of the Friday the 13th series in regards to kind of the Jason Voorhees kind of like sort of style of kind of makeup of, you know, under the mask and all that kind of stuff. So I think if you're a fan of that type of movie, you're going to be interested in this. If you're a wrestling fan, there's also an element here that I found was quite fun. So obviously, if you're a fan of wrestling, you know, we know that it's kind of like essentially a ballet, a rough ballet. It's kind of a show that's put on. It's not kind of obviously real fighting, so to speak. And there's an element here that is introduced. That obviously, the question is asked of this guy: wrestling is fake, but can you fight in real life? Can you actually defend yourself in real life, or is it just kind of like a rough ballet? And that obviously gets answered within the film itself. But I thought it was like, again, this movie kind of has a couple of interesting kind of things to say, certainly about our kind of central character and kind of maybe somewhat mundane things that he has to maybe kind of deal with. I thought it was quite good and quite subtle, all good there. And I think that the movie goes at a fair old pace. The kind of the horror doesn't start until kind of the halfway mark, but I feel it's still fairly well paced for this kind of style of movie. It doesn't work. So I want to kind of stay with the kind of the character side of stuff before anything else. So I like the fact that these guys act like kind of real guys when they're kind of out drinking, the kind of the way they're kind of like you know, prank each other, so to speak. But here's where I had a problem with it: is that these four men didn't seem like they would be friends in any shape or form. They just seemed super different to each other. There's no way that I saw any connective tissue between these four characters, because I just didn't seem like they were completely kind of different people, and there was no real sense that these guys had a particularly good chemistry, because they just seemed very kind of like one type of personality or extreme personality each, and I just didn't buy that these characters would be friends. They just seemed a little bit too extreme in their own separate kind of personalities. There's this one guy who's like an extreme womanizer, for example, and I've got to say it almost looks like Buck is annoyed by his friends for the most part, which doesn't help the kind of like the believability that I'm supposed to believe that these guys are friends, because he just seems he can't stand them. So I just didn't feel like there was that a particularly good chemistry. There should have been a little bit more in regards to the writing, in regards to establishing that these guys are friends and having a little bit more bonding, I feel, because I just didn't get that from them. We spoke about how I feel this movie hits the mark if you're a slasher fan, but I've got to say, for me, this was just a by-the-numbers plot in regards to, you know, going through the motions. I've likened this movie to the Wrong Turn series, and that's had about a gazillion sequels in it. And this just seemed like another kind of sequel to that. And we've seen plenty of movies in that genre, and that kind of like the Backwoods kind of slasher, the inbred types. you know, the Deliverance kind of specials. And this doesn't do anything really new with that. It's just more of the same. Now, that might not be a problem for you, but I feel with low budget filmmaking, you don't have the budget to do, you know, big kind of special effects, set pieces, things like that, sweeping, you know, lots of extras, things like that. But what we can do is maybe be clever with the writing. And I feel the writing, whilst it's not bad, it's just kind of like mundane. There's just nothing really extra here. It does try and have a little bit of an element later on in the film in regard to try and expand the kind of the world, so to speak, expand the mythology. But I've got to say, there's kind of two twists to this movie. The first one I kind of saw coming a mile off, but I at least commend the attempt to have somewhat of a kind of expanding the world. However, the second twist, which is right at the end, it's about the last 20 seconds of the movie, the film makes a decision that comes out of nowhere and makes zero sense. It is a very frustrating decision, I've got to say. I thoroughly was disappointed with that ending, I've got to say. They might have thought they were being clever, but it came out of nowhere. I think if you're going to have a twist, you've at least got to seed it. But this just came out of absolutely nowhere and made no sense whatsoever. The acting is a little bit kind of like hit and miss. Like I've said, the guy who's the womanizer, it just seems a little bit too cartoonish. Bart, our central character, seems a little bit kind of like mopey, a little bit kind of through the movie and stuff. I feel they're leaning in a little bit too much into their kind of like their character traits, so to speak. And of course, the movie goes into the familiar, let's make dumb movie decisions. Oh, well, let's split up for the big portions of the movie and things like this, and all of the old, you know, tropes that you'll see. We're introduced to kind of like a bunch of other characters in the movie, and they are purely there for cannon fodder. And you're just like, this. I feel kind of a bit cheated that we're being introduced to secondary characters halfway through the movie, when we just know that they're just there for cannon fodder. They're just there for victims. I mean, it ups the body count, which is one thing, but it just seems like they're just fodder. It's just cannon fodder. But overall, this movie was still entertaining. I was interested from the beginning to the end, what I think works best about this movie is actually the subtle kind of like some of the kind of the character work here in regards to the how a celebrity, so to speak, would fare in a kind of a real horror situation, and maybe some of the just the kind of the fun things that maybe might be too subtle for some viewers, but for me it made it a little bit more interesting. You know, having seen what like a wrestler would do in this kind of situation, and the little kind of like the elements that, oh, it's a celebrity and people kind of recognise it. I actually kind of quite liked it. That is something that maybe you don't see so much in horror films, but the general story itself is somewhat generic. But it's still entertaining. I still had a good time. It's well paced. I really enjoyed the kind of the slasher makeup. It's very much Jason Voorhees here. When we kind of see our guy unmasked, it's, you know, you'll be reminded of the kind of the Friday the 13th series. It's very much a homage to the kind of that. And I thought some of the kind of the gore effects were quite well done, albeit on a kind of a low budget scale. So if you're a slasher fan and I feel this is definitely one to watch. You like your wrong side, your Backwoods movies again. You know, it's worth a watch. Just don't be expecting anything too new. And like I said, some shaky kind of like writing here and there, I suppose. But worth a watch, I would say. I will give this one an above average mark. I'll give it a 6 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I shall look forward to you next time. Bye for now.